Okay, so this is just a little bit of a close-up, so I can just maybe just point out why I like to paint road surfaces this way. Now, there's many ways to do it, but roads are just a flat canvas. There's nothing to them really. So the way to add interest or to build in what would seem to be texture, but on this level it's just layers of paint, right? Like you can see the second coat of Titan Buff. You see how it's just showing through here? That's from the wet sanding, but it's not everywhere. Like when you do like a spray bomb, like the typical road is fine, right? But when you do that, it's very consistent across the whole road surface. Whereas this, it's like there's nothing consistent about it, right? And roads are like that. The real world's like that. Okay, so we've now sealed. Remember, I put on 3 or 4 layers, thin layers of just Vallejo washes, which I don't shoot through an airbrush. I just squirt it on and spread it with water. And then I sealed it or wet sanded those layers, and then I sealed it with Varathane, right? Let it dry. It's a nice satin finish, which makes for a nice surface for washes to sort of spread out on. Now I'm going to throw on 3 or 4 more washes of a little bit darker gray, right? And I'm going to start by just wetting down the surface a bit. Which brings me to a point of discussion where I can talk about just quickly the difference between technical versus expressive. Like I heard somebody mention, not on the channel, I think, but somewhere else on a podcast, that sometimes tutorials can be overly technical. There's nothing really technical about this. Like technical, it really refers to like science in the sense that I can do all these, half a dozen procedures exactly right, and I'll get the exact same result every time. Art's not like that. Like art doesn't necessarily measure things, right? Like you can do this process 6 layers every time and do it this way, but you're never going to get the same result. It'll be similar, but you can't reproduce it. That's what art is. Like art is just expressive. It's like don't get bogged down in the technicality. Just let go and just have fun, right? Try stuff. And when you use thin layers, you don't have to worry too much because you're not going to make that big of a difference with one layer. And so you're going to experiment and you're going to discover things that you would normally not discover if you had this, subjective technical approach to it. So I don't see this kind of thing as being technical. It's just try stuff. Okay, so at this point you have to decide if you want it dark or light. And I like what's happening here, but I wanted to lighten it, so I just put a very thin wash. Again, just lots of water, some drops, and just a wash of gray. You can see how it lightens it. If you want to darken it, then you just use a dark sea gray. If you want to lighten it, I use pale blue gray. Okay, so you can see that's all you have to do. Like when you don't have to abandon your style of painting, but if you adopt this method into your painting kit or your style or methodology, you'll always be able to alter the color of whatever it is you're painting, whether it's a building, terrain, rock face, road, bridge, even rolling stock and locomotives if you want to do that, right? Washes will always help you change the tone of a color. If you feel it's not going in the right direction, you just use lighter. If you want it to go darker, use darker. Okay, so I just want to briefly just cover this part. This is where I'm at right now, obviously. And so notice the plastic here, like I peeled the tape off here. Like I've got, you know, most of my base layers for my concrete finish over this balsa wood and over this softwood pieces here. Okay, and then if the deck is balsa wood, these barriers are balsa wood, and then you can see how I laminated plastic to it and then put a cap on the top. Now I painted all this to get all my base paints and layers on just for now. It's not the final. But notice how I left the tape, like I trimmed the tape, cut the tape away. Okay, and then I left this top cap taped. Right, there's none on this side, obviously, and then there's none here now. It's just this raw plastic because I'm going to attach plastic rod and H-column from my railings on top here, so I get a good weld to this plastic. I would never build railings like this out of wood because it just don't have the strength. And you're going to hit it. It's an overpass in the mall. You're going to reach in and you're going to KO the thing. Normally, I would do this out of brass, but I'm not going to because, well, here, I'll give you a couple reasons. Brass would be the toughest and the most robust and break resistant, but I don't want to impale myself either. Like I don't want to cut myself, you know. That's why I mean, it's all about a decision, like a kind of a predictive decision that you have to think of when you're working around your model railroad or operating or whatever. So I would rather go with the happy medium of plastic over wood or brass for railings on this. Even though, you know, I might change my mind. You know, I do that now and again, right? As I get along, I go, wow, maybe I will do them out of brass. But no, I don't think I will. Because, or why was it because? Well, because this balsa wood core, and it's not going to hold brass well. But the plastic will hold the rod and the H-column good. And I think that's a good compromise. And plastic is easy to work with, to cut, snap, and scribe. It's about as easy as wood, right? And this is wood and plastic, right? So I'm okay with that, okay? Okay, so I just wanted to show you the surface now, the finished asphalt painted surface on the bridge. And as you know, I used about 6 different grays, all Vallejo air with just water and a standard brush. There's been no airbrush work on this road surface, or the whole bridge for that matter. It's all done with washes and a traditional brush. So you don't have to have an airbrush to do really nice work, right? That you would be happy with. You can do all this with craft paint too, if you so choose, you know. So each to his or her own, you know. I like using good quality pigments for more reasons than one. I've stated in the past, okay, about the longevity of the color fast and the quality of the pigment that holds out over craft paint. Craft paint fades dramatically after 10 years. It'll never look the same, not even close. So I find that when you use really good quality pigment and you seal it, it holds the color fast. That's what color fast means. When you buy good quality paint, it'll have a color fast rating on it. At least they do with artistic paints like golden. So anyway, you can see the different shades there. See how it changes as you move it, sort of? That's all washes. Like you see the modeling here and the weathered. That's from wet sanding, right? Like remember how when I first began with white, then light grays to dark? So I worked in the opposite. And then you wet sand lightly, and some of the lighter colors start to show through, and you get all this here. And then you put another wash over top or a sealer. Like it's up to you, right? Just have fun doing glazes. Try stuff. You're never going to get like, looks like this if you don't try stuff. And this is just simple. It's just streaks of like wet it down. I showed you I drip paint on and then I brush it out even. Let the streaks reside and just walk away, come back, look at it and say, okay, do I like this or not? Do I want to lighten it or darken it? And every time you add a layer on it to change up to your likeness, it ends up working in your favor anyway. I mean, look at all the... I didn't do that with a little brush like this. It just happens on its own when the water retracts and dries and leaves pigment, right? Good quality pigment does this, okay? Okay, so you wouldn't believe what I just did. Now, I like to be more in control of weathering. So I got a bit of white paint. I don't know how I did gray paint splattered on here. I don't know how it happened. I think I was moving my airbrush or something. Anyway, so I grabbed a rag, and some of my rags are wet with water, and some are, guess what? IPA. I grabbed the wrong rag, and I went like this, and I cut through all my nice layers for my blacktop. I went, oh no, right? And then I realized, you know what? Don't panic. Just turn it into an anomaly on the road. Like you ever see on roads where there's been car accidents? It's like, okay, let's say in this case where there was a fire, that's what it looks like. So there may have been an accident. Guy was rear-ended, whatever, spun around. And then I did a bit here. I fixed this up or added more. Like it caused me to just add some more anomalies, which I like to do at the end after I paint the lines, but it'll be okay. So, and then there's some down here too. Let me slide this down for you just to show you. Actually, this part worked out okay too. Right here. See? My thumb there. Right? So, all is well. But, at first I was like, oh no, but that's part of the randomness, the failure rate that you can turn in, the silver lining in the fail, right? That I talk about. Okay, cheers. Okay, so I thought I should cover some of this masking of the road, the markings. So this bridge is, I got the measurement off of Google Earth, right? There's a tool on Google Earth to the left on, there's a bar there, and you can convert, it's got meters, feet, etc. And you can just pick a point and stretch a line across, like you can figure out any structure the size of it, right? And it wasn't hard to figure out the height of this bridge because underneath the bridge on the abutments, I took a photograph of the height clearance for trucks and stuff. So, but you can estimate that. That's not hard. But to get the width, you can get it right off of Google Earth. Like this bridge here is 62 feet wide. Like it sort of shows 70 feet, around 70 feet on Google Earth. But that's, there's going to be some variances there, right? So I looked up the width of roads, like in rural, and it's 10 to 12 feet between the lines. So this is about 10 and a half, or give or take 10 or 11. HO here. Yeah. Yeah, so it's 10 feet. 10 feet, because I got to get the bike lanes in, right? If I don't get the bike lanes, some, environmental or green troll will, attack me, right? But anyway, so what I did was, I just happened to have this line. I couldn't find my thin line auto tape, which is cheap, but I got this Tamiya, which I usually use for, you know, locomotives and nicer stuff. But I needed to lay the lines out, and I want to get this done, so I couldn't find it, so I just had this on hand. But I have lots of Tamiya on hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask off, like that's my line. So I'm just going to use this tape to mask off, because I like this tape here because I don't need to throw a clear coat over top of it to prevent paint bleed. You don't need any with Tamiya tape. It's that good, right? It's not the cheapest tape in the world, but for this kind of thing, it's a one-shot deal. So what are you saving it for, right? Okay, so that'll be good. Then I'll just use masking tape for this part here. But just for the lines area, I'm going to use Tamiya. Okay, so I just want to talk about the drain pipe modeling here for just a few minutes. So this is HO scale. So I got the rough measurements. It's 4 to 5 inch drain pipe, like the commercial drain pipe for big standing structures, etc. At least for highway overpasses and stuff. But this is probably 80 thou comes out more to 6 inch, which I'm okay with, because that's the nice thing about HO is you can cheat inches and get away with it more than you can with like O. I mean, that's the benefit of O and 1/48 scale, right? Is the increments are more accurate, so you can be more scale. But HO is nice that way. It's more forgiving, and probably more so in N as well. But so I'm going to use 80 thou for that reason, and it's also easier to drill in, a little bit easier to work with, and a little bit. Well, I wouldn't say it's stronger to bend. Like, it's probably more difficult to bend. So the smaller diameter is going to be easier to bend. And I find evergreen to bend with your hands fairly easily. If you keep the diameter like over the edge of your thumb, like that works good. If you do it slowly. And if you need a right angle, you can bend past without snapping. Sometimes it'll break. If it's really cold, it might. But it also re-glues really well. So that's the beauty of it, which is why I use the solvent, right? Because it mushes and welds plastic really well. Like, for example, the 30 thou, what's that for? Okay, so if I want to join, like, into an elbow, so I use the 30 thou and just pin it, drive it in, and then I drill a hole in here, which is easy to do because you can start the hole with a number 11 blade, right? And then just drill it out with the appropriate size drill bit. And then I just slide it on like that. And just a bit of glue and she's good to go, right? And then with the strapping, now if you want to do like long sections to strapping, I just cut short pieces of 10 thou by 40. And I use the 10 thou because it wraps better. I find if you use thicker or heavier on smaller diameter, it'll break, like it breaks a lot. But I don't find this particular 10 thou really ever breaks unless you saturate it with glue. But if you pinch it like that and then just put a dab of glue, right, it wraps around nice, see? Then you can just nip it off once it's dry, and then add a little more glue to close up the gap if you want, and then you just come along and you just clean it up with a nail file and you get really nice pipe and strapping. And if I want to do like long sections like ahead of time, I just put a pencil mark and then a dab of glue on a piece of parchment paper and just press it down, right? Like I can do that here quick. I'll show you. Like I would just go like this underneath and then just press it down and then just let it tack up. And then you can wrap it, pinch it around. Right? You can do it that way as well. So I'm going to have my work cut out for me when I do Ipex plastics. So this is a good warm-up for that, I guess. But I'll be doing it this way as well. Of course, it'll be different diameters. I'll just use the appropriate diameter thickness rod for that particular application. Okay? So this will be a nice finishing touch along with the railings. And then just in closing on this, you can see this is the base of the drain pipe here for another part of the bridge column, and I just pinned it as well, and then I made a little, just took another piece and capped it on the end and filed it round. And this is just the sump pipe that just slips on like that with a bit of glue, and then it's the sump that are at the base like that, see? Okay, so drain pipes, vacuum pipes, grain pipes, plastics, you know, pipes, whatever, is easy to do, easy to scratch build. Okay. Okay, so I've installed all these pegs where the stanchions will be attached to, and I'll show you that. But what I'm going to do first is take a piece of scrap. This is just a couple millimeters thick or whatever. It doesn't really matter. I'll just use it as a spacer to clip all these at the same height. Yeah, look at that, I tweaked that and it's still held, see? Pretty strong. Put all my weight of my hand against that and it's still held up. Okay. Okay, so just going to finish up the railings now. Now, one mistake I did make is I started laying up the railings while I was building the drain pipes just for economy of time, and that was a no-no. And I know better, but I did it anyway. And you know what happened is I busted off, I would say at least half a dozen of these in 3 different places. Just bumped them, you know, snapped them off just from shifting it around, you know, and laying up the drain pipe and gluing it, you know. So 98% of the model do the railings, not even at 95%. 95% was the drain pipes, right? Now the railings, now I'm doing them because that's all done. They're painted, glued in place, so now I'm going to do this. And what I'm using here is for the railings, I mentioned the 35 thou for pins and then the channel earlier, and then I'm using HO scale 2x3s for the rails. Okay, I was going to use a little bit larger, but I decided to go a bit smaller. 2x3s about the size of the metal railings. There's two of them running on there. And then I have a piece of this number 252 square tube, and I just slip it over top of the stanchion because these were cut proud at 3 feet. Remember, so it gave me something to hold on to. But these are only about 2 feet high, so because they're already on top of this high barrier here, so which brings the railings just at around 4 feet or so, roughly, give or take. So I'm just going to slide this spacer at 2 feet HO scale and then just go all the way down on top of every stanchion. This will ensure that each stanchion is exactly 2 feet high all the way down the rail, right? Okay. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just close with this before I show the finished pics. So these have been airbrushed gray, that kind of blue-gray. So what I'm going to do is just mix up a slurry, just a wash, really, of number 71.053 dark sea gray. Okay, and there it is. That's all it is. Just water, right? Okay, and so I got the bridge laying on its side. And I'm just going to dab in to that channel because that'll have a bit of shadow. And then I'm just going to stroke this dark sea gray wash with lots of water. Use lots of water. Keep the brush wet all the time. And like I say, if there's any flood marks or tide marks, as they call it, that I don't like, I can etch those away a couple of ways. I can reuse my airbrush if I want, or I can just come back with a lighter blue-gray later and just touch things up a bit, just to change up some of that. Okay? So that's what I do, and then do both sides, and then it just gives a little bit of that weathered look on the railings. Like these here. Okay. I can even do some of the drain pipe too if I want, so these couplers pop a bit more. Okay, so I just want to add this part in the closing. I was going to leave this out, but I felt it would be incomplete if I didn't. So just quickly then, remember when I talked about when you use tape, when you apply tape to a painted surface, especially if you use just cheaper masking tape, that you clear coat over top and it'll seal the seam. So if you put washes on, it won't seep past the tape, right? Now in some cases, that's what you want. You don't want any seepage. But in this case, because I had to remask off all the railings to paint them, I wasn't going to use really expensive Tamiya tape, and I wasn't concerned about that because I know from experience, and this is where experience trumps head knowledge, okay? Whereas you can just read a book and watch a video, but if you don't actually do the practical, you're never going to learn or experience it. So I've been doing this for a long time, as most of you know. So I know from experience that if I get seepage behind this tape on a concrete surface, I'm not going to panic, because I know full well it's going to create a randomness that I wouldn't normally create trying to articulate with a paintbrush, okay? So I'm just going to peel this tape off, and you're going to see what this actual paint, like this color, dark sea gray, as a thin wash does when it seeps, most notably down these seams. Remember these panels? There's a reveal here, right? So the wash goes on, it goes down the seam and seeps out onto the gray concrete weathered surface. And you're going to see all the staining and the blemishes that's quite common with older concrete. Like when concrete is first poured, it's really clean and super light looking, but it only takes one season or two before it really starts to age and blemish. And you can see what the wash has done. There's a type of texture there and staining that, you know, would be pretty difficult to pull off with a brush. Okay? And it's random as well, which is perfect. And now, if I don't like some of that, but I actually do like that personally, but if I don't, I can take some 1000 sandpaper, right? And just a little bit of water. And I can actually, here, I'll just show you on this part here. I can actually soften some of that very lightly. Make sure you use a nice wet sanding paper as a lubricant so that you only take that layer down a little bit on that panel, see? And you can see you can just soften that edge a little bit. Make sure you use just a water-soaked rag, not IPA. And you can see the effect that you get, okay? So these are the kinds of things that when you're actually modeling and doing it, the happy little mistakes sometimes that I've talked about before that work in your favor, and the effects are actually quite remarkable and convincing, okay?